around 2019, we started, a couple of products that were more focused for the livestock side of the business, just based on, the level of protein and the functional carriers that they use. And so, basically the improved products, we have a 28% protein product, and then we have our 40% protein product, which is Improve MX. And it's a low inclusion product that is dried onto a functional carrier. And with Improve MX, it's canola meal. So it has some additional benefits. And part of what makes our products unique is that they are dry roasted, onto that functional carrier. So it helps increase palatability, and we see some, additional benefits just because of that proprietary process as well.
Welcome to the Beef Podcast. I'm Travis Mullenix, and today I have Nancy Heter with me. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Travis. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Nancy, you're with Rangen, going to discuss some of your products, or your line of products, and some research that you guys have done with some of those products, and just to make people aware of you guys out there and what you have available.
Yes, I'm excited to be here, and I think it'll be fun to kind of go into our history and our product line.
Yeah, so to give the audience a background, who is Rangen and what is their products?
So the history of the company kind of has an interesting story. It started out, at least for the livestock yeast division, it started out actually in 1881 with the F.L. Emmert family, so based in Cincinnati, Ohio. And it actually started as a saloon. And so back in those days, farmers were buying spent brewer's grain from some of the local breweries. And when they would come into the F.L. Emmert saloon, they would complain that the farmers were only, always late picking up the spent brewer's grain. So this gave the Emmert family, the idea to start a new business. And so at that time, they started buying the spent brewer's grain from the breweries and reselling it to the farmers. So after that point, they kind of had, some different products that they tried. And it was really in the 1970s when the company began, developing the brewer's yeast supplements that we have today. And the neat thing about them is that they are co-products from the brewing industry. So I think it's just kind of a neat story. So ultimately, the Rangen livestock nutrition name may be new to some people, but the livestock yeast platform has been around for more than 55 years. And they have some longstanding partnerships, with feed manufacturers and nutrition companies across the U.S. And over the time, the companion animal business probably received more focus. But the livestock side, always had very loyal customers. And so the F.L. Emmert company was acquired by Wilbur Ellis. And at that time, they really started, investing more in the livestock yeast side. And then with the acquisition in 2025 of the whole Wilbur Ellis nutrition division, which livestock yeast was part of, we became Rangen. And so, today under the Rangen brand, we're really increasing our momentum. The company is investing a lot more in technical sales, support, research, and marketing. So it's an exciting time for our company. And then, from a product standpoint, I think what makes us unique is that we are brewer's yeast supplements, is what we produce. And so we have products with varying levels of protein and different functional carriers that we can really try to help nutritionists, pick the right product for the right application. So I think that makes us kind of unique.
And that product line is called Improve, correct?
Yes, we have like some BGY products that were kind of our historical products. And then around 2019, we started, a couple of products that were more focused for the livestock side of the business, just based on, the level of protein and the functional carriers that they use. And so, basically the improved products, we have a 28% protein product, and then we have our 40% protein product, which is Improve MX. And it's a low inclusion product that is dried onto a functional carrier, and with Improve MX, it's canola meal. So it has some additional benefits. And part of what makes our products unique is that they are dry roasted, onto that functional carrier. So it helps increase palatability, and we see some, additional benefits just because of that proprietary process as well.
What makes those products, the Improve MX, what makes it different than all the other yeast products out there?
So our products are, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, but they're a postbiotic, and where they're a brewer's yeast supplement, compared to like a yeast culture, they have some different functional benefits just because they are a brewer's yeast supplement. And so brewer's yeast goes through a fermentation process where that same batch of yeast is used in 20 to 25 different batches of beer. So we call this serial repitching. And so basically what happens is that process really strengthens the yeast cell wall. And so as that yeast replicates and forms bud scars, it just really reinforces and thickens that cell wall. And we think that's, one of the things that help the product really, get to where they need to in the gastrointestinal tract so that they survive, going through the rumen and, all of that to get to the hindgut to where we can really see some of those functional benefits.
Yeah. So, and you kind of touched on this, but, the origin of the yeast is important. And its value to the market can be important too, as like you're talking about, is versus a bacterial yeast, etc. What value are you guys seeing in feeding value compared to others?
Well, we haven't done a lot of like head-to-head comparisons. They have with some past research trials. And, mainly our goal was to know that we performed at least as good, if not better than the competition. That's where we found just a lot of confidence in our products. They do perform as well as, if not better in some situations, to other yeasts on the market. And so our goal really is just to help whatever kind of animal it is get more utilization out of the ration they're being fed. And so I think with the research we've done, that's what we're seeing. And we recently just completed a feedlot trial in Iowa. And this trial had over 1,300 head of cattle in it. And these cattle, a lot of them were purchased in the eastern U.S. from sale barns, brought back to Iowa, commingled, put into treatment pens. And so we felt like it really depicted a true commercial scenario. But they were high-risk cattle. So we didn't know for sure, what kind of results we would see. And we were very encouraged because the treatment cattle ended up, even though not statistically significant, they, continually throughout the feeding period weighed more. They ended up 94 pounds heavier. So still a good trend, even though not significant. And they had a lower cost of gain. And we actually saw a significant interaction between time and the ration and cost of gain. So the control cattle started out with a lower cost of gain, but the Improve MX cattle, they steadily decreased and then ended up having a lower cost of gain overall. So we were really happy with those results. And looking at dry matter intake, even though they gain more without eating more, they actually ate 1.6 fewer pounds of dry matter per pound of gain. And so that number wasn't significant either, but we felt like that was a strong directional trend, that we're hoping to explore more in further research. Because obviously, if you can get cattle to finish the feeding phase eating less, that makes it better for everyone.
And the study was a finishing ration, correct? It wasn't a backgrounding or...
No, it was a finishing trial, yes.
And so, and you fed the Improve MX, which is the 40% crude protein.
Yes, that's correct. It was our Improve MX product, which is a low inclusion. It can be fed 7 to 14 grams per head per day is our recommended feeding rate in the feedlot. And what we did in this trial was we fed them 14 grams for the first 56 days and then decreased down to 7 grams for the remainder of the feeding period.
Yeah. So when you say low inclusion rate, you really do mean low inclusion rate when we're talking about
yes.
7 grams. Because in my mind, when you said, the MX is 40% crude protein and we're doing an finishing ration, my mind was that's a lot of protein.
Right.
But
right.
That's 14 to 7 grams. That's a very low inclusion rate.
Versus like our Improved 28 product that's a 28% protein, we recommend feeding it at 2 to 4 ounces per head per day.
Yeah, quite a bit more. But still, I mean, we're talking about a very small inclusion rates that potentially can have a big biological impact. And so, I mean, even though you don't have the significance yet, but by increasing gains, decreasing dry matter intake, increasing efficiency during the feeding period, that's a big win.
It is. And I mean, especially looking at the cost of gain and how that part was significant, I think that's a story, that will resonate with a lot of producers.
Yeah, especially with the cost of feed, and so by just that small inclusion can have a big benefit.
Yes.
When producers and nutritionists look at your data, what are they practical takeaways from the MX?
Well, I think just as you mentioned, the Improve MX product can be fed at very low inclusion rates, so it doesn't add a lot of cost to the ration, and it can really be used across species, and we're seeing similar effects. And so I think whether people are starting cattle in a finishing phase, or cow-calf, there are applications where it can help them just utilize the nutrients that are in the ration, better. And so I think that's the real takeaway, is just helping those cattle have more digestibility and overall better performance.
Have y'all started looking at this? And this study was a feedlot study, but there's some benefits from fiber digestion that is truly needed on the cow-calf standpoint. And so, and you're talking about digestibility, increasing digestibility. Is there studies, are y'all looking at, doing this on the cow-calf standpoint as well?
I would like to do a cow-calf study. We have some older data from the 90s and some receiving trials, and some weaned calf rations where we did see some good results and, some increases in average daily gain, and just overall increases in digestibility. And so I think looking at it from a cow-calf standpoint has a lot of practical applications. And so that is something I'm hoping we can do here in the near future.
Yeah, definitely see some big benefits from that standpoint. How do you feed it? I know on the feedlot side, that's pretty easy, is just inclusion rates into. How would you recommend a cow-calf producer feed it?
So personally, we use it in our mineral, or in the winter when we're feeding a corn distiller's ration, we would put it in that as well. But it goes into a micro machine, can be included into a VTM, a pellet. So I think there's, that's the one thing I didn't mention, is that our product is an inactive, so it is shelf stable. And, that is another advantage, to worrying about a live product.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with that, is that some of these products are live products, and getting them into a pellet, getting them into a cube is problematic. And so it makes it a little challenging for a cow-calf producer of adding some of these feed additives when they can't have a feed mill add it to a pellet or whatnot, because they don't have a mixer. They're not feeding a TMR, et cetera.
Right. And I mean, with the Improve MX product, we would recommend, either feeding it through a micro machine or having your local co-op mix that for you, because the low inclusion rate. If it's a product like the Improve 28, we do have producers that top dress that, where it's fed at, 2 to 4 ounces per head per day. So I think kind of depending upon your operation and what your goals are, we've got products that can work to make it easy as well. And the product does blend very well. That's one thing our customers comment on. So, and I think a lot of that goes to those functional carriers that really help distribute the product evenly. And so it does a great job of blending.
So what is next for you guys?
So I'm really excited about some of the research we're doing. As I mentioned, we're getting ready to start a trial where we'll be using single source cattle being fed on smart feeders. And so I think this will give us, some additional data to look at some of the effects we saw, some of the trends, in the first commercial trial that we just did here this year. And so I think the second study, could be really valuable, looking at some additional things that we weren't able to evaluate in the first one.
Yeah, in a more highly controlled setting of single sourced, if there's a benefit, it's going to be easier to pick it up. It would have been great to pick it up in a load of high stress calves. But from a building block, having that single source would be very beneficial, showing there is a benefit here.
Right, I agree. And that's why we're excited. We're going to get carcass data and some additional data as well. So I think it'll be a really good study for us to evaluate.
And that's the Improve MX again, correct?
Correct. Yes. A lot of our historical data has been, research done with the Improve 28. And so we are doing a little bit more trials right now with Improve MX just to add some additional data, to our database on the new, where it's a newer product just recently developed in 2019.
For a lot of the nutritionists, academia nutritionists that may be watching this, should they go about, if they're interested, how should they go about getting a hold of you guys of, hey, we'd like to try this product?
So if they wanted to reach out to me, rangen.com is our website, and my contact information is on there. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. And we also distribute the product, some of those distributors that are commonly used in the industry to make it easy for customers to get product.
Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to discuss?
I think we hit pretty much everything.
Yeah, it definitely seems to have could have a big benefit in the feeding world of increased feed efficiency, increased gains, decreased dry matter intake. Definitely could be a much needed product, especially if it worked well with them high stress calves and didn't have a big pull rate, didn't have a big sickness rate, abscesses, etc.
Yeah, I think, we did see a reduction in pulls in the period 3 because the cattle, both sets of control and the treatment, there were quite a few pulls just because of the nature, where they were higher risk cattle. But we did see reduced pulls and an increase in average daily gain in period 3. And that's kind of when they were stepping those cattle up. So I think that was positive as well. But really excited to see the data that'll come out of our trial with the university and just where that's more of a controlled environment, because usually you'd expect more of a response kind of during that receiving early feeding phase. And we actually saw more of a response the longer they were on feed with the commercial trial. So I think it'll be interesting. We're not sure if that was because they were, such higher risk cattle. But I think it'll be interesting to see with, the next trial we're doing with the single source cattle, what the performance results are with it.
Yeah, or it could be a length of time on the supplement to have some kind of rumen stabilization that could benefit fermentation rates.
Yep, that's a good point as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. A lot of great information. I think it could be a great resource for a lot of producers. Yeah.
It's time for our famous 3.
Boehringer Ingelheim puts cattle first. They deliver cutting-edge vaccines, parasiticides, and supplements to help keep cattle healthy and productive. From supporting fresh cows with Bovical calcium boluses to protecting your herd with pyramid vaccines, Boehringer stands with veterinarians and producers every step of the way. Put cattle first on your operation. Learn more at bianimalhealth.com/cattle.
So glad to have you on. And so to wrap us up, I've got 3 questions here. The first one is, what is your highly recommended beef resource?
Well, I think it's probably the same as a lot of, nutritionists at NRC. Is something I use a lot. I think from a practical standpoint, producers, if they're looking for a good resource, there are lots of things like Beef Magazine, Feedstuffs, that can really provide a lot of good information as well.
Well, the NRC, or NASM now, I guess, is the holy grail for nutritionists. And so,
yes.
What is a non-ag book you highly recommend someone reading?
So I just recently finished Make Your Bed, and it's by William McRaven. He was a retired naval officer, and it was a short read, and I think just a great message, on the small things we can do every day to really make a difference. And so whether personally, your personal goals or goals you've set for yourself professionally, or even in your operation, I know there's things that my husband and I talk about personally in our operation where there's small things you can do that really make a difference. So I think it was just a great message. And like I said, a short read that, I really enjoyed.
No, that's great. And I remember, I believe it was him that gave a speech about making a bed.
Yes.
And so, yes. All right. Lastly, what sets apart a successful beef professional from someone that isn't? So
I think really looking to provide value to your customer. not just trying to make a sale, but really helping provide value so that it really can impact, their operation. To me, then providing good customer service, is really what it comes down to. I think in today's world, a lot of times we're lacking customer service in different things we do. So I think just following through and, keeping that customer service mindset is important.
No, it's very important. Well, Nancy, thanks for jumping on the podcast. A lot of great information, a lot of good results coming from some of your products. Looking forward to seeing what you guys do next.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Travis.